So you have the Israelis were involved, and also I'm sure you believe the neocons were involved in this, right? How about, well, Tillman and others, right? They were deceived, but you have generals in the army and so on. They're very intelligent and they could figure it out. Now, of course, did they feel it was a deception, or were they part of the deception?
Well, the thing is that you have to understand that the U.S. military, of course, like all militaries, is a completely hierarchical establishment. The guy at the top says snow is black. Everybody down here says snow is black, sir. Right? That's how the military works. You learn that in basic training. So the U.S. government is the same. State Department says this, you say yes, sir, yes, ma'am. It's all like that. The whole U.S. government's like that. That's why they have to control the executive branch. When you control the guy in the White House, you control the whole executive branch of the government, which is now basically like 80% of the government, right? And what I noticed, I worked with the Palestinian cause a little bit. I'd go to Washington because that was my field of study, and I'd go there and try to help the Palestinians, find out why they couldn't get their act together and everything. And what I found is, with the U.S. military, is that they were enamored with the Israelis. They thought the Israelis were the smartest, most intelligent, best military in the world. And that's what they believe. And because when you start putting Americans into Iraq or into Lebanon, you're dealing with a country, you don't understand the culture, you don't understand the language, you don't understand anything. So you need somebody in between to interpret what's going on in Iraq. That's where the Israelis come in. Like in Afghanistan, when the United States was in Afghanistan, helping al-Qaeda and fighting the Russians, the Israelis were managing the whole thing. They're the ones who have people that speak the languages and would interpret for the Americans. Oh, like now they're talking about we're going to vet the guys in Syria, so we'll give guns to the good guys and not to the bad guys, right? How do you vet Syrian soldiers when you don't even speak the language? You don't understand anything about the culture. You have no idea who's who. I mean, Arabs have like 10 different names. How do you know who this guy is? Well, because the Israelis will do the vetting for you. You see? Like these beheading videos, as horrible as they are, and this whole thing, how did these videos actually come to us? They came to us from the Site Intelligence Group, which is an Israeli-run operation that keeps eye on terrorist groups. It's run by a lady named Rita Katz, an Iraqi Jew whose father was an Israeli agent who was hanged in Baghdad in the 60s. Then her family came to Israel. She studied at Tel Aviv University, and she has this little website. It's basically an Israeli intelligence website. So she admitted the other day on CNN about one of these videos. She said, yes, we actually showed the video before the bad guys because we had it beforehand, she said. She said, we had it beforehand. And they only showed it after Site had showed it. So you see, this is all wag the dog. The Israelis are the ones who are pulling America around like a bull with a ring in his nose. Come on, this way, guy. Okay, stomp here now. Okay, now stomp here. And that's what we are. We've been reduced to like mercenaries. We're like the janissaries for the state of Israel. They want to build greater Israel. They want to control the Middle East. The Americans are the ones who are doing it for them. Yes, sir.
Some of the biggest blockheads in America today are the American so-called skeptics, partially led by the likes of Michael Shermer and others of that sort. What's your opinion about the failure of skepticism in this country to utterly fail in the analysis and in getting at the truth of 9/11?
Well, are you talking about a specific group or in general Americans?
Skeptics in general.
Yes. Well, I can tell you that every single institution in this country has betrayed us about 9/11. Our churches have betrayed us. Our schools have betrayed us. Our political leaders have betrayed us. Our law enforcement has betrayed us. Everybody's betrayed us. All it shows me is how utterly rotten our system has become. Because we have had it very good for a long time, since World War II. I finished high school in 1975, which was the peak year, actually. Things were going very well in the United States. And people felt that, well, we're so rich, we're so powerful, we're number one in everything. It must be God has ordained us to be so great. We got fat and lazy, and we didn't pay attention that the mice were taking over here and there and everywhere. Like we have a defense policy board that creates policy for the Pentagon from a bunch of Zionist Jews who have inserted themselves between the Pentagon and the government, so that people like Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl craft the policy, and the Kagan family You know, the Kagan family, the Donald Kagan, you might say Kagan, I don't know. Donald Kagan, Robert Kagan, Frederick Kagan. Donald Kagan is the father from Lithuania. He's a little bit cross-eyed. And his two sons, Robert and Frederick, they created a group called the Project for a New American Century. They came out with a document in 2000 that said this. It's called Rebuilding America's Defenses. It said the United States will have to occupy Iraq and build bases in Iraq whether Saddam Hussein is there or not. So Saddam Hussein wasn't the issue. The issue was that the United States will go into Iraq, occupy it, and put bases there, like we have in Germany, for example, which is exactly what we did. We built huge bases and huge embassies, like we're there to last forever, right? And now the Israeli plan for the Middle East is to cut the big countries into little pieces ethnically, so that like they'll do to Iraq what they did to Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia used to be a big country with 7 districts. Now it's 7 countries. And they're all very poor and very weak, which is what they want to do. It's called Balkanization. That's what they want to do in Iraq. Now, when you talk about skeptics, the media, everybody has betrayed us. So I wrote a letter to the Pope, the new Pope, the Argentinian guy. I sent him some basic material from architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, that anybody can see that the government version is false. I didn't send him my book or anything. I said, Pope, you have to understand that we have been deceived. And it would be very important for you just to tell the people, listen, people, we have been deceived about what happened on 9/11. That's all you have to say. But the Pope won't even do it. You know, they're more concerned about homosexuals here, or homosexuals there, whatever. They're concerned about all kinds of pseudo issues, while the burning issue, the elephant in the room, is like, oh, I don't see it, I don't see it. I hope I answered your question. Next question, please.
All right, I don't mean to digress much, but you are a whistleblower of sorts. How do you balance what the sacrifices this has cost you and your family to do this? And I perceive it as a very noble thing, what you have done, but the problem is people like to believe what's in their comfort zone.
Right.
And so we have those people coming out, Snowden,
Right.
Assange, and very little changes because we don't want to become uncomfortable here.
It's true.
So I'm not, you know, people do what's right because it's right, but
Right.
How do you protect yourself?
Well, I'm on tour here from Sweden. I really only would have a judicial problem if I went back to Illinois. If you remember that song from the 60s, Indiana Wants Me, Lord, I can't go back there. Well, I'm the next state to the west. Illinois wants me. And the mayor of Chicago is Rahm Emanuel. And Rahm Emanuel, I spoke to his father. His father is Benjamin Emanuel. He's an Israeli guy born. Well, the thing about Benjamin, I spoke to Benjamin Emanuel, the father of Rahm Emanuel, and I said, Mr. Emanuel, I understand you were a Zionist fighter in the 30s and 40s. Can you tell me which organization were you with? Were you with Irgun? Were you with Begin? He said, no, I was Lehi. He was Stern Gang. He was under Shamir. And the late Sherman Skolnick in Chicago, who was in a wheelchair, who was a great Jewish truth digger into the Cook County court system, he said that Benjamin Emanuel was, not only was in Lehi, and we know that, but that he was involved in the murder of Volker Bernadotte, who was the United Nations envoy who was sent there in the 48 to kind of like make this partition plan work somehow so it wouldn't be war. And there was they did a Bonnie and Clyde. They stopped his car outside Kalandi Airport. These Israeli guys, you know, went to the car with the Sten guns and killed him in the back seat. Colonel Serrault, the Frenchman, and Volker Bernadotte, who is the uncle of the current king of Sweden, and who was married to the woman Estelle. And it's interesting that Victoria, the crown princess of Sweden, her new baby is named Estelle, after the American mother. But you say, what about my price that I pay? First of all, when I started writing this, it's just the destiny of God, that I happened to be in New York on that day, that this fell right into my lap, that I have a specialty in these kinds of government cover-ups. I've seen them. I know how they happen. I know how the Israelis operate. I have all this history in my head. So it's like I said, well, this is. I'll write about it. I'll dig. I'll look. And people would say, you're very brave, you're very brave. I didn't see it bravery. My logic was that 99% of the American people, really 99.9% of the American people, are on the side of truth, right? Yeah. We want to know what happened. The only guys who don't want the truth are those who are the culprits or who are associated with the culprits. And I said, well, that's got to be less than like 1/10 of 1%. So what's there to worry about? I'll tell you what's to worry about. That 1/10 of 1% are rich, powerful, and organized. And the 99% are neither. Some have some money, but we're not organized. And I got to say this one thing. Kurt Vonnegut, who is from Indiana and a famous author, he wrote Slaughterhouse-Five. I lived in Slaughterhouse-Five for a little while, but that's another story, in Dresden. But Kurt Vonnegut wrote a book called Sirens at Titan, in which he says this very interesting quote. He said, "There's no reason why good should not prevail as often as evil." He said, "The triumph of anything is a matter of organization." And he said, if there is such a thing as angels, I hope they get organized along the lines of the mafia. You see, and there are angels. There are certainly angels. I believe in angels, but we are angels. We are good people who believe in the truth, who believe in our country, who want the best for our children, for our families, for our neighbors. And it's our duty to organize things like this, to organize ourselves, to fight for the truth, to show these bastards who've done this to our country that we're not going to take it. That we're just not going to take it. I mean, we have to show some backbone. And Americans are not used to the whole idea. It scares people. Wait, you're telling me that the media is lying about all this stuff? Well, now, when I look at the media here in this country, I turn it on. It's scary. In the hotel, they have this Good Morning show. It's just fluff. It's just inane fluff from beginning to end. It's like, what has happened to the minds of people? You know, it's mush. And it's like, and CNN is just like the constant barrage. It's like in New York, you know, in New York, the media bombs you with bombardment with messages all the time. American TV is the same now, everywhere. It's mindless, it's clueless, it's not truthful, and it's just meant to confuse you. It's just meant to confuse you. So we have to, yeah, you have to turn off the TV, you have to read, and you have to train your mind in critical thinking and have moral courage. And what I do, it can be very depressing. You know, I live in Sweden in a little apartment. It's like DDR, you know, and sometimes I don't make enough money to pay the rent. Then I have to go to the social office, and they say, well, you're 2,000 crowns under the norm. We'll take care of that. And they put 2,000 crowns in your account so you can pay your rent. It works very well. And I try, and they actually, you know, when I came out with these books, I got in a program for the, you know, work guys. It's called Start to Agate, Start Your Own. I said, yeah, I got this great book, and I'm going to sell these books, and we'll reach that norm, no problem. We'll make that norm. And they put me through a course, and I gave it to the teacher. Said, this book is great, you know. And so, but Sweden is a very fair country, and they've let me do this, you know. So I can only say that that's a good thing. But you know, look at my life. Okay, you're only on this planet for a short time, right? I'm 57 years old, born in 57. I don't know, my dad, if I'll live to be, you never know when your last day is. So you have to do what's right while you're here. While you're, it's like that. The question back there?
To your knowledge, how do you see the possible overlapment of what we call surveillance state, NSA, DHS, and Israel?
Oh, God, that's a good question. It's a little bit out of the subject, but it's very true. These Israelis have for years been inserting themselves again as the men in between, the people in between, which is a very important aspect of this book. How this transnational, transgenerational criminal syndicate works. And they insert the people in between. So that, like, at the NSA, the two companies that were in the middle, who were diverting the prism, who were diverting the data here and there through the prism, was an Israeli company. Both companies were Israeli, actually. And as we now know, the data has been going to Israel all along, unredacted. Not just the metadata, everything's gone there. So the Israelis have all of this NSA information. What do they do with it? They use it for blackmail. Like that General Petraeus wasn't quite doing what they wanted to do. They say, hey, what about that girl from North Dakota that you're screwing, huh? You think your wife should know about that? So they put a dossier together from the emails, because he and that little girl from North Dakota, the biographer, were basically using the same mailbox. They thought they were outsmarting the whole thing. We're writing in the same mailbox. They'll never know. Israelis are reading all of it. They put it together in a dossier, and they gave it to a few key guys in Congress. They say, take this ball and run with it. Petraeus was gone the next day. And this is an old history. The Israelis, the whole spy operation, remember the Israeli art students? They were inserting themselves into DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, because they wanted to know, what does the DEA know about us? This is how it's done. These people in high places are all blackmailable. Yeah.
I have one more question.
Okay.
To your knowledge, what is the relationship between the Vatican and Israel?
No, I don't. I don't know what the relationship is. I know that there's been some.
Banking connection of some kind?
I don't know. The Israelis don't give the Catholics a great deal. I mean, they. I don't really know. I mean, there's. Yeah, I can't say. Yes, please.
Yes, I was watching YouTube and I saw Hillary Clinton with Dick Cheney on some kind of a TV show. We don't watch television. So.
Right.
And they were laughing and joking. And they said they always go to the CFR to get all their information. What is the connection with the Council on Foreign Relations and the White House?
Well, the CFR is one of these consensus-building organizations, like the Bilderbergs, like all these people. I can speak about Bilderberg more because I used to be a paparazzi for the Bilderbergs, paparazzo. And that's where I saw George Soros and Carl Bildt. I have this great picture of George Soros and Carl Bildt in Brussels on a break. And George Soros was looking at me like this. And then after that picture, the thugs came after me, and that was the end of that. That was the end of that operation. I had run for my life. But the thing is that these organizations like CFR and all of these think tank type operations and Bilderberg is when all these rich men and politicians from the whole Europe and America, basically the NATO countries, go to a secret meeting in the beginning of June every year at some resort in Europe. And David Rockefeller is the American head, along with Henry Kissinger. And these people, they basically present their ideas for the coming year. And they have politicians there and leaders of industry, and they give them the consensus idea. This is what we're going to do, right? This is.
Don't you think they chose, though, because didn't they interview before we even had Hillary Clinton and Obama,
Yeah.
before they ran for office, they interviewed them in front of the council.
Yeah, of course.
So they must pick the presidents, and they say you can have Coke or Pepsi.
But they're part of the consensus. But I can tell you about Obama because I'm from Chicago. Obama was a non-entity in Chicago. He was a complete non-entity. He became a state senator in Springfield, and that's basically a talking shop. They don't do much, right? But then in 1992, before he became anything, a woman named Betty Lou Saltzman discovered him. And Betty Lou Saltzman is the daughter of Philip Morris Klutznick, who was the president of the International Order of B'nai B'rith. So he's at the highest level. I talk about that hierarchy. He was at the highest level of the Zionist secret society known as B'nai B'rith, who runs ADL. Well, Betty Lou Saltzman said in 1992 that Barack Obama will be America's first president, first black president. She said that. And then she with her father's money, they're very rich, they got David Axelrod and Rahm Emanuel to basically shape Obama into becoming a political candidate. So he went into office in Illinois in the Senate, and then in 2004, he was running for the U.S. Senate. But he was an unknown person, really an unknown person in Chicago. And what's interesting, they were running for the seat of a guy named Senator Fitzgerald, who was leaving the Senate. So the seat was open, the seat was vacant. But in the Republican candidate had a sexual problem, impropriety of some sort, and he pulled out of the race in June of the election year. So Obama was the only candidate running for the U.S. Senate seat. It was a one-man race. And this is not the first time that Obama won a one-man race. All of his races have been like one-man races. You see? And that's what the same thing, same idea. Exactly, same idea. They run a straw man candidate like Dukakis or McCain. You run a guy who couldn't get elected dog catcher. And it's like John Ashcroft was the same. John Ashcroft, who was the Attorney General when 2001 happened, he had lost a race in Missouri against a dead man. So I mean, This is the problem we have, is that our political system is completely corrupt. They select the candidates, and then they bubble up through the media, and they say, oh, look here, we have Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, and over here we have Rand Paul. And it's like, where do these people come from? The media creates them. They come up through these same channels. And then it's like you say, oh, so democratic, so democratic. I have you know, bad and worse to choose from. Yeah? And that's how it works. And then they control these voting machines. This is where I really entered, when I first entered writing about this in 2000, I wrote an article in 2000 called The Death of Democracy, or May the Best Hacker Win. Because I had worked for IBM, and I wanted to be an election judge to earn, you know, a little bit of money on election day. And they showed me this machine that they said, and at the end of the night, they said, we just put the punch cards through there. And I said, well, how does the machine communicate? There's a modem in the machine. And I said, well, what kind of security do you have? And they said, we don't need Mr. Bollyn to be a judge. And so I began investigating this. And I found out that the 512K cards were being produced by a guy from the Ukraine. Not Panasonic, not Sony. Some gangster on the west side of Chicago, a Jewish guy from Ukraine. And I called him on the phone, and I said, you know, you make the 512K card, which basically runs the machine, collects the data, gives the commands, everything. It's like the brains of the machine. And I said, well, you know, how did you get the contract? He said, well, there was a little problem with Sony and Panasonic, so I got the job. And I wrote the article, and I said, well, I want you to read this article I'm writing for the paper. I've written all about this machine and the problems with this machine, electronic voting machine. And I sent him the article, and he called me back and he says, you know, you can't print this. He said, you know, I don't want any trouble for you and your family, but I mean, this is the kind of, you know, he was giving me like basically a threat. And I went ahead and published it, and I called the police, and I said, I got a threat from this guy, this whatever his Ukrainian name or Russian name. But I mean, that's the thing, is that the political parties are controlled, the way that the political news is conveyed to the people is controlled through the media, and the voting machines are controlled. It's all controlled by private industry. So we are like, we are led to believe that we're in a democracy with a free press, when the evidence shows that we have neither. So we're in a very serious situation. We're in a very serious situation. And since 9/11, the situation has just gotten that much worse, because now it's intolerable.
I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I called, several weeks ago, I called our chief of police.
Yeah?
Because someone had told me that they saw tanks. The tanks that can go over mines. MREX,
Yeah.
2 of them.
Yeah.
And some other, so I called him and I said, what about that? He says, oh yeah, but we're never going to use this. I said, really? What's the criteria for that, that you decide?
Yeah.
Oh, we've got it taken care of, we just have it, just in case there's a lot of, oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we had an episode in our area
Yeah.
where a young guy was videotaping on a public sidewalk, and you see the police officer punch him in the face, and then they said that he resisted arrest.
Of course. Of course.
And we went to see him to see what had happened.
Yeah.
And this kid, who's about 22, was absolutely terrified.
Yeah, of course.
And he's got a $5,000 bill, and it's just a nightmare. Well, I called the governor's office of Oregon, and I said, what's going on with this?
Yeah.
The governor doesn't have an oversight. This
No.
comes from Homeland Security.
Right.
And he appoints what he calls a coordinator. And the coordinator sits there, and there's no oversight whatsoever. It's just, you want this? It's okay, here. And taxpayers pay this. It's like a revolving door of spending money, overspending. They can't even.
It's like the Soviet Union. Because you see, when after 9/11, Michael Chertoff, who was the man who was supposed to prosecute the crimes of 9/11, he was the Assistant Attorney General, and he's the one who oversaw the non-investigation. He's the one who oversaw the destruction of the evidence. He was supposed to prosecute the crimes of 9/11, and the FBI serves under him, and the FBI is supposed to provide him with the evidence that he uses for prosecution. But as I said, there was no prosecution because there was no investigation. So when you see somebody holding up a sign, we demand a new investigation, you say, wait, it's not a new investigation, we demand an investigation. Right. It's like what they do in Florida, you know, they're counting the shed, we're recounting the vote. Wrong, you're not recounting, you're putting on a facade of counting it in the first place. Right. The only thing that counted it before was some funky machine. When I was in Chicago last time, I attend these, when I was still allowed to go to Chicago, I go to where they're counting the votes in Cook County, which is Crook County. It's the most corrupt county in Chicago. And they know me there. They don't like me too much, but the guys that run it, they say, okay, you can go in and see how the votes are counted. And I was in the back room, and this must have been 2006, like a March special election, 2006. And I had just come back from Venezuela. My stupid paper sent me to go meet Mr. Chavez and try to get $1 million. It was just to get me back in the States. But I went to this election, and these guys, these Venezuelan guys, are walking in the hallway. I say, hey, what are you guys? What are you guys doing here? And I said, I just came back from Venezuela. What? He says, yeah, we're running the election. And they had these Venezuelan company had taken control of, I think it was Sequoia at the time, Sequoia voting machines. And these Venezuelan guys were running the whole counting process in Cook County and across the United States where Sequoia machines were being used. But I can tell you what they do is every election, like in Chicago, they change the machines. They change the machines so you can't, is it ES&S or is it Sequoia or is it Diebold or who's doing it today? And they're doing it across the whole country like that. So our elections are completely rigged. If you want to have a proper election, you have to have the votes counted in the local polling place. So like, this is a voting, if we're a little district here, we had a vote here, we all cast our votes. The public is supposed to watch the counting of the votes for the local polling station. That's what gives an election transparency and integrity. If you, yeah, well, there's other problems, but this is how they do it in France, for example. And when you hand count the votes and you keep the election simple, you're voting for president, you're voting for congressman, you're not voting for 180 judges at the same time, which is what they do in Chicago. And they say, oh, well, we have 180 choices on the ballot. There's no way we can count them. We have to have the machines, you see? It's catch-22. Yes?
So you've been working on this for a long time, and you have a lot of good information, but now just think about what we can do about this
Right.
problem. So for an individual, what would be a good thing that you could recommend, and also for the whole movement as a whole?
Right. The first thing is we have to use our critical thinking, and we have to be informed. Now, I can tell you that I've been a part of the 9/11 Truth Movement since its inception, in the very beginning. And I was not allowed to speak because of the nature of my research. Because I pinned the tail on the donkey, I couldn't talk. And I've, it wasn't until like 2004 when I was in New York City when Jimmy Walter was doing a thing that one guy freaked out, they needed another guy, said, put Bollyn up there. And that was like the first time I was speaking to a large audience about, because the Israeli role in 9/11 in this country is taboo. It's taboo. It's taboo to criticize Israel in any way, shape, or form. When Judge Goldstone, who was a Jewish judge from South Africa, when he criticized Israel in the Goldstone Commission for what they did in Gaza, he said, yes, Israel dropped white phosphorus and did crimes. He was threatened and he recanted. So you can't do it. But what people have to do is they have to inform themselves, understand we've been deceived, then tell their friends, tell their neighbors, so that more people understand. Because I can tell you, I visited some of my relatives down in California the other day, and this guy's a smart guy, he's been a lot of places, and he believes the complete government version. He has not even thought outside that box yet. So people have to be informed, and when they get informed, they get organized, and they stand up against the liars.
So would you suggest that since there's so much backlash against people talking about Israel, that we should refrain from talking about Israel?
No. Israel is a country like any other country. And Israel does what Israel does. I mean, if Germans had done this, if Pakistanis had done that, would you refrain from talking about Germans or Pakistanis? And the thing is that the Israelis use this card. They talk about it. They use this card. One of these Israeli ladies, intelligence lady, told it to Amy Goodman one day. She says, well, it's very simple. If a European criticizes Israel, we talk about the Holocaust. And when Americans do it, we say they're anti-Semite. He says, it's very easy. We do it all the time. And Amy Goodman's like, no. But that's what they do. That's what they do. And so what also they've done is that people like Noam Chomsky and Amy Goodman they have their following. The left, the Nation magazine, but they won't go near 9/11 Truth. They won't go near it.
So the question is, what do we do, beyond talking to our friends?
We have to organize. We have to organize, and it's like, one thing is we can do is like this man's running for Congress, and support people that are running for Congress. He's running on a platform which is bound to be hammered down, though, because he's running on 9/11 Truth. He's going to get pounded. You got to run, I would say, run on the more palatable things like the local issues and keep 9/11 in your back pocket. If you show your card, your 9/11 truther, they're going to ridicule you. You see, even Ron Paul now supports me a little bit. He's read my books, I sent them to him. But remember, in South Carolina, he made fun of the 9/11 truth movement when he was in the presidential debate. So, but we have to organize, we have to push for 9/11 truth, because 9/11 is the Achilles heel of our whole problem. It is the Achilles heel. It is, we have to be tenacious in demanding the truth, because
It's the gateway.
it's the gateway, but it's the Achilles heel. They can't get away with it. It's mass murder, it's terrorism, and we can solve it. We can investigate it, and we can solve it, and we can expose the people behind it, which is what I've done. And then you can just peel off the layers of deception. You see, when you understand 9/11, when you understand who's behind it, everything else makes sense. It all fits in place.
Yeah, it could all come down in one day. I mean, the thing is literally
It
one
could.
thing, like the Pope coming out.
It could, and it may very well do, because I saw how the Soviet Union came down in a few months. Nobody was killed. The whole Soviet Union came crashing down in 1990, 1991, 89. In one day, the whole East Germany went away. In one day. And East Germans who had been shooting each other with West Germans were drinking Jägermeister on the ruins of the wall. And so, and the Israelis had built a wall twice as high, four times as long, but it's just a wall. You know, the Palestinians and the Arabs, and we deserve better. We don't need to have this kind of nonsense, you know, bullshit that they've imposed on us.
But you know, the people are apathetic and they're just so full of fear. And when someone stands up front and says, "Oh, hey guys, you got my back," right? And they go, "Yeah," and then you turn around and they're gone.
But this room's got about like 40 people in this room right now.
So we have 40?
What are we going to do in this, you know, in the next week, among all of us who know about 9/11?
Yeah.
What is the action that we're going to take?
Okay, well, I would recommend if you haven't read my book, read my book. read this first book, read this book, and go to Bollyn.com and get a grasp on the whole thing. And you need that, because you can't, if you're not understanding how it was done, who's behind it, then you're still vulnerable to the Judy Wood theory and the nuclear bomb theory.
We're all understanding of the basics.
Well, are we? Are we? You'll see. Well, you hope so, but maybe not. We have to see.
I mean, just in response to that question, I feel like, you know, 9/11 is one avenue, but, you know, Israel is pulling all the strings.
Yeah.
We have to put pressure on Israel.
Yes.
We have to, like, do the boycott thing.
Yes.
We have to call out what's going on. We have to be in solidarity with the Palestinians. We're all Palestinians now.
Right. I've been saying that for years. Now, the thing is about, like you said, about the boycott thing. That's very true what he says. The Israelis have no hinterland. It's a little tiny country. And you saw that when, during the July offensive in Gaza, one missile landed near the Tel Aviv airport and the FAA shut down American flights, that sent up alarm bells, because then the people in Israel said, "Oh no, are we trapped in this ghetto? Are we trapped here?" And they were. And so who did they call? Mayor Bloomberg. Mayor Bloomberg got on the first plane to Israel. And there he is with Netanyahu, arm in arm, and say, "Yeah, Israel's the best, safest, most secure country in the whole world." And it's like, Mayor Bloomberg is the main guy. He's the controller of New York City since 9/11. He has put the kibosh on any discussion. He has told those firefighters and policemen and city officials that if you utter a word about 9/11 truth, we will arrest you, take away your pension, and prosecute you. That's how it works in New York. Wait, I have to ask this lady. This lady has a question over here. Let me get her question. Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested in stopping Hillary Clinton, and I'm interested in the connection with Ukraine, Victoria Nuland, John
Yes.
McCain. I understand Victoria Nuland's married to one of the CFR.
Robert Kagan.
Okay.
She's
Yeah,
Mrs.
okay.
She's Mrs. Kagan.
And I wanted to ask about Penny Pritzker as well. I'm
Okay.
wondering how much of this is connected, because GMAC was mentioned in here
Okay,
as well,
yeah.
and she's here present, whereas John McCain,
Yeah.
I've been following him since I was a kid
This
from
is the
Arizona, and he shows
Okay.
up in these conflict zones. So when he went to Ukraine, if Victoria Nuland is choosing Yatsenyuk.
Yes. This is the McCain book. This book was written in Phoenix, Arizona, by a man whose name is Mel Rockefeller. He's the illegitimate son of Nelson Rockefeller, and he befriended Jeff Gates. And this Rockefeller knows how it goes. He knows how this whole thing works. And Jeff Gates wrote this book. This is about McCain. He wrote it in Tempe, Arizona. And this talks about the criminality of John McCain and how he and how the whole thing works. How the whole thing works and McCain's role in it. So this book is also, this is a very interesting book, but I would call this also a very good understanding of who John McCain is. Because as you see, John McCain and Lindsey Graham are two senators that had never seen a war they don't want to get into, you know? But what you said about Victoria Nuland is very...
Lynn is connected with your...
Yes, but Victoria Nuland is part of this Kagan family, these Zionist neocons. She's, as I told you, the Kagans gave us the Iraq War. They were pushing Clinton to bomb Iraq, which he was doing every day, and the best he could. But then when the 2000 election came along, they were pushing for this war in which the United States would go into Iraq and occupy the country, whether Saddam Hussein was there or not. So the Kagan family, who brought us the war in Iraq, are now bringing us the war in Ukraine. And you know, I live in Europe, so when this was all happening, I watched Russia Today, and I watch all these other sources that you don't get here. But what's interesting is that there was a scandal because Victoria Nuland was taped on a telephone call that was leaked, where she basically said "F you" about the European Union. Well, okay, that's not the important thing she said. The important thing is that she said prior to that, she said that she chose, well, you know, she's talking to the American ambassador in Ukraine, and she says, well, it won't be Klitschko, the big boxer, and it won't be the guy that runs the neo-Nazi party. It'll be Yatsenyuk. It'll be Yats, she said. So this is 2 weeks before the Israelis and the neo-Nazis overthrew, with guns, overthrew the elected government of Ukraine. She had chosen who would be the next prime minister.
Did you say the Israelis?
Yeah, you haven't read my stuff about Ukraine. You have to go to Bollyn.com and read what I've written about Ukraine, because I wrote about it as it was happening.
Snipers?
What they did, it's very interesting. This is in the Israeli media, in the European media. There were guys who were born in Russia and Ukraine who have gone to Israel. There's many of them, right? It's like a third of the population now. They are the most extreme Zionists. They have a party called Israel Beitenu, Israel Our House. This is the Sharansky party. But these guys went back to Ukraine at this time, and they led, these Israeli fighters from the Golani Brigade, led the neo-Nazis called Svoboda in the attack against the retreating forces, being shot from behind because the snipers were in the hotel. But the guys that were running the military operation which overthrew the government was a guy named, well, one of them was Delta. He's an Israeli. He has his code name Delta. But later the Israeli press revealed who he was. He's a rabbi. He's an Israeli rabbi who went over and led, because they needed to have people who knew how to run an operation, a military operation. They needed some command. These other guys were just like Ukrainian kids. And I got to tell you one thing that's very important. The United States military government, U.S. military intelligence, creates in Eastern Europe neo-Nazis. They create these skinheads. I've seen it in Estonia. They did it in Ukraine. Because this becomes like a group of black shirts, a group of fascist kids that they can like rent a mob. You need some action, you need to overthrow the government of Kiev, get the black shirts. It's just like the 1930s all over again. And the United States, I've seen how they did it in Estonia. Estonia is a very small country right on the edge of St. Petersburg with Russia. And the United States has done exactly that in Estonia. I know it. I know the people who do it. And then now I see how they did it in Ukraine. They do it all across because the idea is with these America doesn't, even these neocons don't want a shooting war with Russia. So what do they want? They want tension. They want to create this tension so that they don't care if Ukraine gets divided into two pieces, which is likely to happen. They just want to create a tension so that they can vilify Putin all the time. Mr. Putin's doing this. Putin's Hitler. Putin's doing everything wrong. Because they want regime change. They want Mikhail Khodorkovsky, for example. If Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the guy who spent 10 years in jail for corruption, if he becomes the president of Russia, the Zionists have it all back in their pocket again. All the wealth of Russia goes back to the Rothschilds and all those people who support this whole play. Same thing, they don't want a war with Iran. They just want to overthrow the regime. But in getting this, they're willing to take great chances. And they don't mind if a few thousand people get killed. It doesn't matter. It's like Hey, it doesn't matter to them. It's not their kids that are fighting. So it's really dirty. And the United States government completely was running the putsch that happened in Kiev. And that's what a lot of Americans don't understand. I was at an event in Davis the other day, and this man argued, says, you came here to give facts, but what you're saying about Kiev, it's not true. It's not true. Well, I'm sorry, if Fox News hasn't told you this, or CNN hasn't told you this, doesn't mean that it's not true. Another question?
Well, my mom is going to vote for, my mom and her roommate and all those people are voting for Hillary Clinton, and I want to point out, because we know the Ukraine well, and I want to point out the connection with...
Well, with Hillary Clinton, all you got to do is point out that Chaim Saban has given hundreds, or at least tens of millions of dollars to the Clinton Library. And if you want to know who runs the Clintons, get a donor list of their library.
Qualifies as a war criminal today.
Which one?
That's all
Which one you want?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Go ahead. Say again.
She qualifies as a war criminal.
Yeah, she's a war criminal. You're welcome. Not only is she a war criminal, you remember what she said? Remember what she said about when they killed Gaddafi? She joked about it. She joked about it. She says, "We came, we saw, he died." She's not well in the head. She's from Oak Park, Illinois. She's not well in the head. You know, all I can say is that, but the idea, they want to give us this idea that the only people who can run our country are either Clintons or Bushes. What kind of country is this? You know, hereditary monarchy?
She's a woman.
Back there.
Okay, you mentioned that Silverstein was involved with drug running with the Clintons. Were you talking about Mena, Arkansas, or somewhere else?
That indictment, the Miller indictment, when?
No, Mena, Arkansas.
Yeah, okay, Mena, Arkansas. Well, the Clintons in Mena, Arkansas. That's all true. That's all true, and that's their original sin. Nothing. You have to understand this. Nothing binds people more closely than a crime committed together. So the Bushes and the Clintons and the Israelis are all involved in this huge drugs import that was going on illegally in this country in the 70s and 80s. Like I point out, this Israeli aircraft industry has a production plant where they fix airplanes in Bogota, Colombia, of all places. What do? Yeah, they fix a wheel on a plane, and then they repair it again when it gets to San Francisco. Yeah? And they take out the cocaine. And they've been doing it for years. And you see, that's the thing, is that this drug smuggling is where they get a lot of black cash to run these operations. And the Bushes are involved in it. The Clintons, it's their original sin. The Clintons have left behind them a trail of corpses in the hundreds. They're criminals. But just the fact that they're receiving millions and millions of dollars from an Israeli agent named Chaim Saban should be enough. But in this country, it doesn't work that way. I pointed out that the judge who was overseeing the 9/11 tort litigation in New York, there were 96 families who wanted to sue, they wanted a trial in New York to find out what happened to their loved one. They said, we don't want the government handout. The government handout, we don't want the $1 million from the government handout. We want justice. There were 96 families who lost loved ones. And Ellen Mariani was the last one. And they wanted to know who dropped the ball. It took the lives of 2,000, 3,000 people that day, including their loved one. And they went into a tort litigation in the courtroom of Alvin K. Hellerstein in the Southern District of New York City. One by one, those cases were settled out of court. One by one, until there was no cases left. And the last one settled was Ellen Mariani's. So there's been no trial. But what I found out is that Alvin K. Hellerstein's son is a lawyer in Israel who went there in the year 2001, and he works for a law firm in Tel Aviv who represents the key defendant in the 9/11 litigation that his father is overseeing in New York. Now, because that's his son, that is a fundamental conflict of interest. You cannot have an immediate, like a daughter, a wife, husband, or son, that have connections to a defendant in your trial. That's automatically a judge should recuse himself from that and say, no, I can't do this. And I hammered on this, and I hammered on it, and I even told that Hans Luik in Estonia, I said, there will never be a 9/11 trial. And at that point, there were like 50 families left or something, and he couldn't believe me. And I said, sure, there will never be a 9/11 trial. And so he made a bet with the president of Estonia, this American CIA agent, Ilves. And Ilves says, there will be a bet, there will be a trial, and Luik said, no, there won't be. And Luik won. There was no trial. There will never be a trial. Imagine that. In the most litigious society in the world, America, 3,000 people die on 9/11 and not a single trial. And the key defendant in the trial was an Israeli company, a Mossad company called International Consultants on Targeted Security. Now, I listened to Gilad Atzmon. He was in this town the other day, and he's an Israeli dissident. And I always wanted to ask him, Mr. Atzmon, are you related to Menachem Atzmon? Because Menachem Atzmon is the owner of that company. It was the key 9/11 defendant. These are the people who let the bad guys on the plane. Passenger security, they call it. If you go to any airport in America, the guys that run security are Israelis, Israeli companies. So a company called Huntley USA was the company that was like, oh, letting the people on the plane, checking them. And that company is owned by ICTS, by this Israeli Mossad company based in Holland. The man who owns that company, runs that company, is like Gilad Atzmon's uncle. So I asked him, Gilad, I said, Gilad, you know, what does Atzmon mean? And he says, you want to hear? It means fortitude in Hebrew. But he says, and I say, you know, I always wondering, are you related to Menachem Atzmon? He says, yeah. I said, that's very interesting. And he went on to say, he's also related to a guy named Yellen Moore, Nathan Yellen Moore, one of the founders of the Likud terrorist group in Israel. And he says, I'm also related to Janet Yellen, the Federal Reserve chairman, because she's related to the Yellen Moore family. Yellen Moore from the Likud and Janet Yellen are the same family. And there was one other in there. Yeah, he said Zippy Livni. He said Livni, he said, is the same as Atzmon, means the same thing. Zippy Livni, who's the foreign minister of Israel, was foreign minister, is also a relation to his. So I felt like, I said, I wanted to be polite, and I said, well, you know, Gilad, now you can understand why you do what you do. And he said, he's going up the stairs from that little pizzeria, he says, yeah, it's a lot of guilt. It's a lot of guilt. And I thought that was really amazing. That made my whole visit to see Mr. Gilad Atzmon worthwhile. And then went to a jazz club and he played jazz. But I mean, this guy, Israel is a very small society. And if you are at the top, if you're in that society, you're right at the top. Like I lived on a little kibbutz Afakim in the Jordan Valley, right? This all started by Russian Jews, Lithuanian Jews, right? I knew them all. These old people, you know, it's like an old geriatric house, you know, there are a lot of old people there. But it's interesting that I knew a lot of people, but the woman who's married to Shaul Mofaz is like one of the highest guys in the state of Israel. She's a kibbutznik from Kibbutz Afakim. So what I'm saying is it's a very small place. The whole country of Israel is like the size of Riverside County, California. And they talk about a population of 8 million. In their dreams, 5 million of them living in New York and Florida and California. You know, and they never go home. I know them because my wife is one of them. And they go home to Israel only if somebody dies, somebody very important dies. They don't want to go back. They can't stand it anymore. It's for a secular Jew, for an Israeli secular who grew up in the labor kibbutz, they can't tolerate anymore. Because the Russians run the place and the Orthodox Jews have taken over. And they don't like being told that they can't do this, they can't do that, because the only religion that is prevailing in Israel is the Orthodox Jews. Reform and conservative Jews, like my sister's Jewish. She's converted to Judaism, my sister. She has 3 beautiful girls and a husband. But because my sister had a Reformed conversion in Israel, she's not a Jew, and her children would be deemed as bastards. Huh? What a state. What a state. And they talk about Israel being the savior of the Jewish people. You know how they got a lot of them there? How did the Iraqi Jews got there? In 1949, they needed more people. They needed people. They needed people. So what Mossad did, the word Mossad comes from Mossad Aliyah Bet, which means the agency for illegal immigration, basically. Aliyah Bet is illegal immigration. Aliyah Aleph is legal immigration. They needed people. And so what they did, they wanted the Iraqi Jews. They said there's like lots and lots of Jews in Baghdad. They've been living there for a long time. Well, how do we get them to leave their comfortable life, their comfort zone in Baghdad, and come to Israel? What'd they do? They made their comfort zone a little bit uncomfortable. They put bombs in the synagogues. Mossad put bombs in the synagogues in Baghdad, scaring the Jewish people of Baghdad in Iraq to go to Israel. And in Yemen, Michael Chertoff's mother was running an operation called Operation Magic Carpet. They went down there to Yemen, which is at the very southern eastern tip of Saudi Arabia, a very poor country, very old Jewish community. And they basically went up to the Sultan or whatever and gave him a few gold bars and say, give us your Jews. And he said, yeah, you can take them all. And they were treated like cattle. They were round up, put on these planes. You can see pictures of them today. They're all sitting there in these planes. They've never been on a plane before in their life. They're like people from the Bible, old people. And they're being flown, and they were being flown secretly into Israel. And you know who was running it? The hostess with the mostest? Livia Eisen, Mrs. Chertoff, Michael Chertoff's mother. And then she and her husband, they settled in New Jersey, and she ran an art studio. You find all these old Mossadniks running art studios in New York City. Any questions? Any more questions? You.
Give us a little background on ISIS and who's backing him and all that.
Well, I think I kind of did that. ISIS was created as a Sunni skinhead thing, kind of like the same idea. They create these extremist groups that are based on either religion or race, and they wanted to create this Sunni group to act as a counterweight against Hezbollah, which is Shiite, and Iran, which is Shiite. So what they've been doing in Iraq since we went in 2003, we've been fomenting sectarian division. Our guys and British guys and Mossad guys have been throwing bombs just like that, like in Basra. They caught these two guys who were dressed up. They drove past when Basra was just being turned back to the Iraqis. They drove past a protest, and they shot machine guns at the protest, and they got away. But the Iraqi police went after them and caught them, and they took these guys, and they unwrapped their turbans, and they were British SAS guys. And they were dressed up like Shiites. They were dressed up like militia, and their car was full of explosives and detonators. So they were gonna park the car someplace, walk away, and blow up a whole market or something. And we've been doing this. This is what they've been doing for 13 years, or however long we've been in Iraq since 2003. What is it, 11 years? And because we've been creating this sectarian division, because we want to pull the country apart. So you want to pull the country apart, you have to pull it apart along its sectarian division. Shiite, Sunni, bomb each other. Kurds bomb each other against this, so that you break it into three pieces. And that's the name of the game. And so we created ISIS to be this like Al-Qaeda, new Al-Qaeda. And so now they've created this force that we have to fight against. You see, we create the thesis, we create the antithesis to get the synthesis, and which is more war, more division, more arms being sold, more money. The U.S. defense budget was $300 billion, big difference. $300 billion in the year 2000 until 2001, until 9/11. After 9/11, it doubled. It didn't go up incrementally. It doubled to $600 billion. And since 2001, it's been going up. So now it's closer to $1 trillion a year, just defense budget. That's not counting Homeland Security, anything. That's just military spending. And who's making the money? Look at Henry Crown from Chicago, the Henry Crown family from Chicago. They own General Dynamics, number 3 or number 4 defense contractor in the United States any given year. They own Aspen Society, they own Aspen Mountain, they own a lot of things. They also own Barack Obama. Barack Obama was the creation. In Chicago, they don't hide it. The Chicago Jewish magazine is called Chicago Jewish World or whatever it's called. They had him on the front page. Obama, America's first Jewish president. They called him it because he was put in power by the Klutzniks. This is just after he was elected. He was put in power by the Klutzniks, the Pritzkers, you said, Hyatt Regency, and the Crowns. These people all have a vested interest in Barack Obama. So people who hope and pray that Obama's going to grow up and break the shackles and stand up against Israel. You know, I was listening to that speech today. Is he going to say it? Is he going to say it? He's not. But they're hoping that it's a vain hope. He's not going to. He's not going to break the chains or leave the hand that feeds him. He was created by these people. He's what you would call in Hebrew, what you call in Yiddish, a golem. He was put together, a man created out of mud to serve the Jews, and like a Frankenstein. They create, it's from Yiddish history. You create this being, like a Frankenstein, make it alive, and he serves you. That's I wrote about it. Barack Obama, the golem. A question, please.
So I'm ignorant.
No, you're not.
And, less ignorant than most of the people I know.
Okay.
But I don't understand, 6 million Jews being killed. Then we establish Israel to compensate.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Okay, now I can't get into all the Holocaust stuff because that's a very sensitive subject, but I can say this. The Zionists and the Nazis are two sides of the same coin. There's in fact a medal, a Nazi medal, where on one side is the Star of David and the other side is the swastika. Because they were working together. Hitler believed, and the Nazis believed, that the Jews are a race that has to live apart from other races. And he felt the same thing about the Germans, that the Germans are a race that have to live apart from other people, that these are like pure races. This is his racism ideology. And this is exactly what the Zionists believe. If you go to Israel and you say, I'm coming back on the law of return, you have to prove 3 generations of matriarchal descent as a Jew. If you can't do that, you're immigration B, not immigration A. I always got immigration B stamped on my passport. But I mean, that's the thing is, and the Zionists were working hand in glove with the Nazis. There was all kinds of transfers and things. So money was being transferred, and Jews were being transferred from Germany to Palestine. But the thing is that the Zionists wanted the same thing that the Nazis wanted. They wanted to create a state where only Jews would be living. You see, Nazism fell down in 1945 and went away, basically. But Zionism has gone on and on and on its merry way. And Americans are supporting now a state where you have to prove three generations of linear ethnicity of it being a Jew. This is very un-American. Why would we support an ethnic state which is chauvinistic and racist? It makes no sense. We as Americans should be supporting the idea of one man, one vote. Huh? This is what we stand for.
So what's the motivation with the Israelis to do what they're doing?
They want to create this state. They have, I'm trying to tell you, they have this idea. Zionists have this idea of Jewish supremacism. If you want to understand better about Jewish supremacism, you should read Israel Shahak's book, 3,000 Years of History, Jewish Religion, 3,000 years. He talks about the basic beliefs of Zionists. What they're taught in the schools, what they're taught in the yeshivas, what they're taught is that Jews are superior to other people, which is not far from what Gilad Atzmon was saying the other night, if you saw him speaking. He drew a bell curve and showed how over here the Jewish elites are smarter, and over here were the white elites, and over here were the blacks and Hispanics. And on his bell curve, the smartest of the smartest were Jews. And I'm thinking, did I come here to listen to a man tell me this kind of stuff? You know, but this is what they believe. They believe that they're superior, and that non-Jews have no service other than to serve them. And this is a whack belief. This is outright crazy. But this is what people like Benjamin Netanyahu firmly believe.
They believe they're God's chosen people.
Also, that's what I mean. This is all bad religion. You know, to believe that you're better than other people, that you're supreme, and that you can dictate to other people how the world will be. This is sick. You know, we didn't get rid of it in 45, though. It's still alive and living well in Israel. Yes?
You mentioned divide and conquer as a strategy. It's been a long time.
Wait, say that again?
History. Then you talk about a little bit about the Balkanization of various parts of the country. And in this country, you hear increasingly talk about succession, various states leaving the Union and so forth. And I see that gaining steam as part of this Balkanization. Your comment, please.
Balkanization in this country?
With the secessionist movements to break up this.
Oh yeah. Well, this is the. There's a couple things going on in this country that are right out of the Soviet playbook. One is this, as you said, the Balkanization, breaking up countries along ethnic statelet lines. Now, you see, if the Oded Yinon plan, that's what it's called, 1982, Israel Shahak translated it for non-Hebrew speaking people, that the Israeli strategic plan was to break up the big countries in the Middle East and break them up into ethnic statelets like Yugoslavia, right? Now, in that way, they would succeed because all the other states around them would be weak ethnic states like Israel, except that Israel is not weak. So then Israel would be the most powerful of ethnic states, and it would give legitimacy to the Israeli racial state because all other states are based on tribal lines, you see? You're Sunni, you're Shiite, you're Kurd, you're this, you're that. We're Jewish. Jewish states bigger than you guys. And the other thing about what's going on in America today is this open border with Mexico. Now, this is exactly what the Soviets did. In the Soviet Union, they moved people around a lot. Stalin, you know, They moved them around and killed them a lot. But they fostered Russian immigration, ethnic Russians, to all these other little states like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, etc., Ukraine, in order to weaken the national flavor of those countries. So that Estonia and Latvia have like half Russian-speaking people. That's what the legacy of the Soviet Union did. That's what they're trying to do like in California. What's that for? A book? Okay, thanks. And that this weakens the moral fiber and weakens the structure of the society. You remember, it's like, so now we have, I'm riding on the MAX train today, and everything, they say something in English, and they say something in Spanish. It's like, you see, so they're trying to weaken the sense of who you are as Americans, that now you also have Spanish, and in Chicago they do it in Polish, and so that, you know, this sense of, what are Americans anymore? You're just like a minority in your own country. And it's to weaken the fiber of the country. And that's why patriotic people say, wait a minute. We can't just have open immigration. We can't just let everybody who comes here be a citizen. You have to go through the ropes. You have to go through everybody else did. People came to Ellis Island. People were quarantined. People went through the normal process of becoming citizens. Or they, you know, but now they want to swamp the country with all these people from South America and Latin America. And it's a ploy to weaken our state.
And don't forget NAFTA, which plundered our country.
And you know who got NAFTA pushed through Congress? Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel was Clinton's right hand, and he takes credit for single-handedly pushing NAFTA through this way.
TPP's coming. That really opened it.
Well, this is the thing. But you have to ask yourself, why would a labor president like Clinton, Democratic, why would he sell out American labor?
Never on labor. He was never on labor. He's a fascist bought by Washington.
There you go. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to, a little history on Zionism. When they were having their first Congress in the 1890s, and they spoke of a colonial home for the Jews, a colonial. So it wasn't religious, it was going to be a colonial enterprise. And they were originally talking about Uganda, Argentina, Haiti. Palestine was one of 5 areas that they had located. But even back in the 1890s, and this precedes Hitler, World War I, they were talking about removing the indigenous population by force if necessary. They were never going to live with or amongst the indigenous population. So all you hear about this war against Islam, the clash of cultures, that is all spin. They were never going to live amongst peacefully. And if it had been in Uganda, we would have been hearing about how horrible the Ugandan people are.
Let me add something to that. You're talking about this, the real Zionism. There was a group called the New Zionists. That's revisionist Zionism. That was created by a guy named Vladimir Jabotinsky. And Jabotinsky, he is the father of the Likud party, basically. He's the ideological founder of revisionist Zionism. And you know who his secretary was? Mr. Netanyahu, Ben-Zion Netanyahu, Milakovsky from Warsaw. And they came to New York. They actually it was running out in New York. The New Zionist organization was based in New York City. Actually, Jabotinsky died in New York City. And when he died, Ben-Zion Netanyahu became the head of the revisionist Zionism. Now, what was Jabotinsky's claim to fame? He writes, in 1923, he wrote a book called The Iron Wall. He said that we have to build an iron wall between us and the Palestinians. And in 2002, what did they start building in Palestine? The Berlin Wall. This, like you said, this is an ideology that has been mapped out 100 years ago, and we're seeing it come into effect now. It's completely racist. It's completely segregationist. It's complete apartheid. Anybody who goes to Palestine, Israel, will see apartheid. But if you're an American Jew, you probably only go to Tel Aviv, you go along the tour route. You don't go to Bethlehem, you don't go to Hebron, you don't go to the West Bank, you don't go to Gaza. The last time I went to Gaza was like 1991. I went with the Archbishop of my church, the Anglican Church, a good guy from Texas, and he said, when you go back to America, you tell the people in your church what you've seen here. I tried to. People in my church didn't want to hear it. In Santa Cruz, they didn't want to hear it because they had formed an alliance with the local synagogue. And so our churches have become completely compromised. You know, the Jews say, no, you don't want to talk about anything about Israel. That wouldn't be friendly for our little Santa Cruz relations here, would it? Question, sir.
Well, Chris, I want you to talk about, you know this so well. There are only 15 to 16 million Jewish people in the whole world. In any city you go to, they lead in the arts, they lead in politics,
Yep.
they lead in banking, they lead in law.
Yep. How do they do it?
How do they do it? There is something.
I'll tell you, it's very simple. It's very simple. You know, all this stuff is simple. It's really, really very simple. The way it works is that if you're an institution of government or if you have a company or what have you, and you promote and a Jew winds up getting in a position where he can make choices, and the choice comes between an American white guy, an American black guy, and a Jew, who do you think is going to get the job? The Jew. All the time. So if it's in a hospital, or if in a law firm, or in a legal practice, you'll talk to doctors about it. They'll say, it's amazing. The only people who get promoted are Jews. But they know that they shouldn't talk about that. That's like anti-Semitic. They shouldn't say that. But they see it's not fair. It's not fair.
The arts also?
Everywhere. Everywhere. It's everywhere. So it's like, if you just read this history, like World War II, for example. In World War II, we had a great material effort. You know, everything was being bought and sold. You know who was running it in the middle of Chicago? Henry Crown. He was the main procurer. He had been in that business of selling gravel and stone to the city of Chicago. So he started making these deals where billions of dollars are being transacted, and he's buying all the stuff the American military needs. Who do you think he's buying it from? He's buying it from other Jewish guys. So they help each other. That's this organization. They always pretend like, oh, we're trying to help everybody, but they're helping each other. And that's how they have risen to these positions. It's not competence. It's not merit. Michael Chertoff wasn't assistant attorney general because of his merit. He is a traitor to the country. He destroyed the evidence of 9/11. What merit is that? He's a criminal. But he is not being prosecuted because he's protected by this whole Jewish network in the media, in the Department of Defense, Department of Justice. How do you prosecute the #1 prosecutor in the nation? How do you prosecute the Attorney General? Huh? That's the problem we have. And they control the whole U.S. government that way. And it might be not the first person. For example, John Ashcroft was #1 guy. He's the guy you see in the picture window, right? But Michael Chertoff was #2, and he's the one who made the decisions. That's the way it works. It's very simple. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to the influence of pornography, the demoralization of the country with pornography and the infiltration of academia with garbage education?
It's what you're talking about is the whole cultural war. Our country has gone through, Western society, America, Canada, has gone through a cultural genocide. And what they want to do is they have to demoralize the people to the point where the people no longer care what's true or what's false. That's where we are today. And so they have demoralized us to the point where the truth doesn't even matter for most people. You know, look at how many people have come to this event tonight. But there's many, many more that should be coming. There should be much more interest in this but unfortunately we are fighting against a huge ocean of apathy and demoralized people. And that's tactical. And of course it is. It's like, every perversion in the book becomes okay. It's okay to pierce yourself and to have tattoos and tattoo your neck. And I live in Sweden, where in a little town in Jönköping, I go to the sauna, the swimming pool, and you see nice girls and nice men, all like under the ages of like 40. They're loaded with tattoos. Like got all this bad ink. They look like a gangster from Fresno. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Where did you people start getting this from? The last time I saw such tattoos, it was like, you know, in LA County and Fresno. This is what the gangsters, and it's like they have celebrated this gangster fashion to become the fashion of Europe and America. It's sick. But this is the power of the media. You glorify some perversion. You say it's okay, it's cool, and if you don't think it's cool, something wrong with you. Not with the perversion.
There's also, in terms of Zionist history and slavery and sex trafficking as well, for the purposes of sex trafficking for blackmail.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and sex trafficking in Israel is huge, and it's huge in Germany too. Among the head of the Jewish community in Berlin in Germany, his name was Friedman. He was having 2 young 15-year-old girls from Ukraine sent every week for his pleasure, and then just dismissed. And it was exposed in the German media. But do you think they made a big deal out of it? No. And in Israel, it's a huge. They import these girls from Ukraine. Ukrainian girls are very, kind of nice girls and poor. And they bring them in from Romania and Ukraine, and they take away their passport and put them in these brothels where they have to work for like years before they can get out again. And this is where we're at. This is what Israel does. And another thing that's very seldom talked about in this country is Jewish perversion among kids by the rabbis and by Jewish leaders in this country. And it's like they'll always point the finger at the Catholic Church, but whenever it comes up, whenever they find something about in the Jewish religion, it's maybe mentioned once, very lightly, and suppressed. So the sexual perversion among Jews and in Israel, it's rampant. It's rampant.
It's also written about. It's like sanctioned.
Yeah, I know.
It's
Right.
sanctioned. It's not
That's
just
right.
a,
That's right.
a perversion.
That's right. In the Talmud, you're getting into some religious stuff. She's talking about the Talmud. The Talmud is the rabbinical interpretation of the Torah. Now that is the main thing. That is the law in Israel. It's not what the Torah. It's not what the Bible says. Not what the first 5 books of the Bible says. It's what the rabbis say about the first 5 books of the Bible. This is called the Babylonian Talmud, and this is the interpretations of Jewish rabbis, like from the time of Christ until later. These are the people that Jesus Christ was really railing against. These are the Pharisees and the scribes. And he says, you have corrupted my Father's temple, etc., etc., etc. These are the people he said, you do not know the truth because you are the sons of Satan. You only know lies. This is what Jesus Christ was up against. These are the people he was fighting against. And that's what is in controlling today. And as you say, they sanction, for example, you can do to a non-Jew whatever you want, basically. Israel Shahak begins his book. I'll just finish. Israel Shahak's book, Jewish History, Jewish Religion, a story of 3,000 years, something like that. It's a very good book. I highly recommend it. I knew Israel Shahak. He starts out, at the beginning of the book is that he was in Jerusalem one day, walking on a Friday night or a Saturday, the Sabbath, and obviously a man had a heart attack in the street. There was a man dying in the street, and he must have been in the Jewish quarter. He went to the house right there where the man was dying, and he knocked on the door, and there is an Orthodox, observant Jewish man answered the door, and Israel Shahak said, please call an ambulance. This man's having a heart attack. And the Orthodox Jew said, well, is it a Jew or not a Jew? And Shahak said, well, it's a Palestinian or it's not a Jew. And the Orthodox Jew said, no, I can't call because I can't break the Sabbath for a dying Gentile. You see, but because in their religion, everything is based on race. The whole history, the whole country of Israel is based on race. There are laws for Jews and there are laws for non-Jews. And it goes all the way down, as you said, to abusing children. I don't want to talk about that. All things are included. All things are included. The Talmud is like that long. Books and books and books and books and books. Please.
So, in answering a question earlier, you spoke of a strategy of Balkanization in the Middle East and other places. But then what sounded like an opposite strategy or something, separating religions and peoples in the Middle East, and then but terrible things happen in the U.S. somehow also created by Israel that is about mixing.
Those are two different things. He brought up Balkanization, and he wanted to know about immigration. So I just addressed those 2 questions in the same thing. No. Balkanization is the Israeli strategy for the Middle East to divide all the big secular countries like Yugoslavia into ethnic statelets, which is what they did in Yugoslavia. So the great big country of Yugoslavia, which was a very dynamic socialist country, is now 7 poor little countries. This is the Israeli plan for all the countries like Iraq, Lebanon, etc., etc. Break them up along, like Sudan. No, and then he also brought up the question of immigration, so I dealt with that.
And succession.
But what we're talking about is Balkanization. Any more questions? Anybody? You ma'am.
I just wanted you to speak. I know you're mentioning Israel and Zionism is the puppet master, and Bush and Obama, I assume, are like, you know, the puppets. And I'm just wondering to what degree you feel they're aware of and complicit in what's in that agenda.
That's a very good question. With the Bush family comes from obviously an American blue blood family from the East Coast. They were involved in drug smuggling way back in the days of China. Okay, so the Bush family is a criminal family that has long tail. I mean, Papa Bush, his father was involved with the Nazis. So I mean, you know, the Prescott Bush. So the Bush family has a long history of criminal and treacherous, treasonous behavior in the United States of America. Obama, on the other hand, does not come from such a heredity. We don't know who his father is, or I don't know if we do know or we don't know, but we don't even know where he's born. I mean, this is a very, very, very strange thing. But Obama does not have that big family behind him with all that history. Obama is just like the puppet. He's just the puppet. And it was very, very clear from the very beginning, because when he speaks, when Obama talks, you just watch. He looks at this teleprompter to that one, to this one, to that one. And he reads very well. You know, he does a great job. He does a great job. But when he doesn't have the teleprompters there, he can't answer any questions. I saw that at the very beginning. He was in Egypt or someplace, or Poland, and the teleprompter wasn't there for the kids asking questions. He couldn't say anything. So Obama knows who created him. He knows who he owes. He knows who supports him. Obama's wife, for example, her brother is a Jewish, has one of those black Jewish groups that say that they are, you know, in Chicago there's these groups that say that they are black Jews and they want to go to Israel, live in Israel. Mrs. Obama's husband or brother is the head of one of those churches, those synagogues. So it's like they saw this was a guy they could control, manipulate, and use, and he knows it. I'm sure he knows it. He does what he's told.
What is the difference between the FBI and the CIA?
Very good question. The FBI is a Department of Justice. It is the sub-agency of the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice. And its job is, like when 9/11 happened, 9/11 being an act of terrorism was given directly to the FBI and the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice to prosecute because it's a crime of terrorism. That means it fell right into the hands of Michael Chertoff, our Israeli Assistant Attorney General. Now, Michael Chertoff also happened to be the one who prosecuted the first bombing in the World Trade Center in 1993. He was then the attorney for the state of New Jersey. So that's when the blind shake and all that stuff, remember? And the FBI had made the bomb that went off. This is from the New York Times. And that the FBI was giving Colonel Saleh, the Egyptian guy, $1 million to like basically run the whole thing. So this is what the FBI does. The FBI is in the business of creating crimes now, creating falsified terrorism. There's a whole score of them that they run. What they do is they basically find some poor Muslim kid or some poor black kid, and they what?
Are you aware of the situation here in Portland?
No, but they do it here too.
The young kid.
The Christmas tree bomber.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They do it all the time. They do it time and time and time again. And it's like, so the FBI is clearly an agency that's way out of control. And the CIA is this agency that nobody controls. It's supposedly under the president. But is it? I mean, we give billions of dollars to the CIA to run this operation. And it's like, I just bought the book today at Powell's Books, Kill the Messenger, about how Gary Webb revealed that the CIA was involved in bringing all this crack cocaine into LA and San Jose and California. And then he was, you know, his editors wouldn't stand by him, and he wound up killing himself, or was killed. But in any case, this is the thing, is that the CIA and the FBI are agencies that are completely out of line. But
CIA
most,
is like a fourth branch of government.
yeah, but what it shows you the level of corruption of our government today. You just can't get away from it. We need to have a complete house cleaning in this country.
Michael Hastings
Yes.
was a journalist.
Yes, I know.
And his car blows, you know, his engine blows up 200 feet behind.
Yeah.
And they say that he had a traffic accident.
Well, what they did is it's just like 9/11. The planes that hit the World Trade Center were remotely controlled. The Malaysian Flight 370 was remotely controlled. The Flight 990, Egypt Air Flight 90, went up and down in the ocean, was remotely controlled. Cars can be driven in the same way. When they wanted to get rid of Jörg Haider in Austria, They just made his car increase the RPMs, decrease brake function, bye-bye Jörg. Same thing they did because our cars today, these modern Mercedes, these modern cars, are just computers on wheels. So, and there's no defense at all. So if you're driving that car, if somebody over there has the computer and doesn't and knows those connections to your car, they can do exactly that. So you better drive a bicycle. Any more questions? One question here, sir, Mr. Chandler.
If we grant all the bad stuff that the Zionists have done and everything else,
yeah.
Who's to say that our own homegrown CIA, FBI, etc., aren't equally doing all that? Because the Bush family has been, has roots back to the Kennedy assassination and so forth, and supposedly the Bushes were involved even there. So, what physical evidence or concrete evidence is there that just because the Israelis are doing all this stuff, our guys are doing all this stuff too?
That's a very good
How
point.
do you divide up who's doing it, and why do you conclude it's the Zionists rather than our own security?
That's a very good question. Okay, now that's exactly like what we're dealing with the CIA, for example. The CIA on 9/11 was being run by the executive director of the CIA was a guy named Buzzy Krongord. Buzzy Krongord, his real name is Krinsky or something like that, Polish name. But when they came to America, Polish Jewish guy, they decided to change their name to something like sounds Scandinavian, Krongord. They say Krongard. He was the operational. He was the guy who ran the day-to-day operations of the CIA. He was executive director, technically the third man on the totem pole. But that's exactly what I was telling you before, is that like, it's not the first guy. The first guy is just there for window dressing. And the second guy. But it's the guy, it's the people who make the decisions, the guy who makes the day-to-day operational decisions. That was Buzzy Krongard. Now, who was Buzzy Krongard? Not only was he running the CIA that day, but his former company, Brown Brothers, was the company that made all the put options. Like basically all those options on the stocks that wound up, with the planes were going to hit the building and that the stock would go down, those bets were going through Brown Brothers, his former company. But now, who's Buzzy Krongard? You might say, I thought at first, for the first couple of years, I thought, oh, some Danish guy or something, I figured. I didn't look into it too much. Then I looked into Buzzy Krongard a little bit later. I see that he's a Jewish man who wants to hide his Jewish identity. That should put up a yellow flag, because if somebody wants to hide their identity, there's a reason for it. And Buzzy Krongard, so I called him up on the phone, I talked to him, I said, and I didn't get much out of him, but I sent him my books. I sent him both books, so he should know, he can read out there on his big plantation in Maryland or wherever he is, he can read what we know about what 9/11. But this is how it works, is that these agencies have infiltrated our government at all these levels so that who's the mastermind of 9/11? That's what you have to ask. Who's behind it? And from the very beginning, I said, there's no way that this is an American plot. There's no way that Americans would do this It's just un-American. You know?
They're doing it to everybody else.
Well, we don't do exactly like that. 9/11 is a very dastardly plot. We don't even pull things like that. There was one of the big investigators for the U.S. government said in the very beginning, he says, we've never seen anything like this except in the Soviet Union. This is a very, very sophisticated Soviet plot, he said, or Russian-style plot. Because it is. It's very convoluted. It's very complicated. Who did it? And I would recommend for people who want to get a little bit better idea about how these things work, read John Le Carré, his book, Little Drummer Girl. And that book was written, John Le Carré wrote that book back in like 1982 when the Israelis were invading Lebanon. And the head of the Mossad was advisor for the book. These big guys in the Mossad were the advisors for this book. And George Roy Hill made a movie about it called The Little Drummer Girl 2. But if you watch the movie, it's very complicated. You want to understand. Read the book. It's very good. And it talks about how the Mossad, for example, leaves a trail, a paper trail. It's a game in Germany where you leave this trail so that then the investigators come along and find this piece, and this piece, and this piece, and this piece, and Muhammad Atta, this piece, Osama bin Laden. It all goes, the trail goes to where the trail is supposed to go. You see? But it's all been carefully laid. All been carefully laid. And so like in Florida, what did we have? We had Israeli guys, a bunch of Israeli Mossad guys living like 1 block away from the culprits, right? And what's interesting about this, the culprits, like Muhammad Atta and all those guys, is that they had all gotten duplicate licenses. Not a new license, they had duplicate licenses issued. So that meant that Muhammad Atta, for example, had his Florida license, and somebody else had another Muhammad Atta license. So that's where you get all these interesting tracks being laid. So the Israeli guy who speaks Arabic and looks like Muhammad Atta goes to the strip club, leaves the Quran there, puts money in the little stripper's dress, and it's like this, and says, I'm Muhammad Atta. See, here's my license, Muhammad Atta. And Muhammad Atta is sleeping over there in Daytona Beach or something. He doesn't know, but a trail is being left that will implicate him. And they all had duplicate licenses, all the guys in Florida. And and it just so happens that all these guys also, most of them, had lost their passport like 2 years before, 3 years before, they lost their passport. So somebody else was using their identity and leaving a trail that would implicate them. Simple. But if you read Little Drummer Girl, you see this is just basic standard operating procedure for the Mossad. Americans aren't that sophisticated. We haven't been playing these kinds of games. That's not our nature. Americans are very honest, good people, basically, all the ones I know. There's a few bad apples, but most Americans are very honest and good people, and that's how they take advantage of us. They take advantage of our goodness, our naivete, and our trust in our fellow man. They're exploiting our goodness to rip us off, basically. Any more questions? That's one last question. This man here.
Do you have any insights about the Mumbai attacks of 2008 that we may not have heard?
Not too many. Of course, it involved the Chabad. It involved the Israeli Chabad. And that whole thing. It's it's just this another false flag, like the Nairobi mall attack happened in the mall. The mall was owned by Israelis. It all began in an Israeli shop, and these reports they're very interesting. It's like these people were watching these shooters. They're watching the shooter, and the shooter went into this clothes store and came out dressed in different clothes and walked away. Huh? And people saw that guy. He went into a shoe store. He was a shooter. He'd been shooting up the place. Then he went in back to the store, and he came out, changed clothes, no gun anymore, just went out with everybody else. This is typical false flag. It was done in an Israeli, and the thing is that they do it, Israelis will only do this, Mossad will only do this in a place where they control everything. They have to. That's why they did 9/11. They not only control the whole New York City and all the investigation, and Michael Chertoff's an agent, et cetera, but they own the building, they own the place, they own the venue, they own the security company, they own every single aspect of it. Like if the Mossad is going to do a hit, like they did in Dubai, they killed that guy. There's like 30 people. There's guys walking with tennis rackets through the hotel. There's this girl, that girl. They're all Mossad. So the victim becomes not, Kennedy was surrounded by shooters from like 10 different directions, right? That's typical Mossad activity. You become completely surrounded. Everybody that's around you is Israeli Mossad. And so then it's just a matter of just killing you because there are no witnesses. Everybody's on the same team. Remember when they did that operation in Dubai, I think it was, or Abu Dhabi, about a couple years ago? The page was full of the people involved was like 30, 40 Mossad agents that had been captured on this closed circuit television. That's how they do it. Well, with that, I want to say thank you very much for coming. It's been a very successful event. Yo, thank you. 20 each, yeah. And I'm so glad that we have had such a wonderful crowd and no disruptions, eh? No, so what's there to be afraid of?